read the land acknowledgement. We recognize that Carnegie Mellon University and greater parts of Pittsburgh occupy the ancestral land of the Seneca, Adena culture, Hopewell culture, as well as the Mahanga and Osaga peoples, who were later joined by refugees of other tribes, including the Delaware, Shawnee, Mingo, and Haudenosaunee, who were all forced off their homelands and displaced by European colonists. We honor the original caretakers of this region and uplift their historic, unique, and enduring relationship with this land, which is their ancestral territory. We pay our respects to their elders and their past, present, and future people, community, and culture. However, we also recognize that the transparency that a land acknowledgement aims to deliver, like the one I'm reading right now, will not dismantle the violent displacement of Indigenous peoples around the world from their land and homes. However, we commit to continued gratitude for the gifts of nature, along with ongoing respect, care, and stewardship of this land, the earth, each other, and future generations. We're committed to learning about and supporting Indigenous communities in the region and today and in the future. Now, I'd like to introduce the fabulous Kite, who I met at first informally, but also had heard about Kite's wonderful work in AI and filmmaking, actually through my friend Amy Rule. And then I went with Amy to go see Kite's fabulous film. Everything I said was true, or everything I say was true. Everything I yeah, at the Whitney Museum of Art, and it was blew me away. And then I wanted to learn more, and just so happy that Kite could find the time to be with us because super busy. Okay, Kite, also known as, and I love saying this, Dr. Suzanne Kite, Oglala Lahota performance artist, visual artist, and composer, raised in Southern California with a BFA from California Institute of the Arts in music composition, an MFA from Bard's College's Milton Avery Graduate School. Really lots of degrees here, and a PhD in fine arts from Concordia University, Montreal. Such a great school. Kite's scholarship and practice investigate contemporary Lahota ontologies through research creation, computational media, and performance, often working in collaboration with family and community members. Recently, Kite has been developing body interfaces for machine learning driven performances and sculptures generated by dreams and experimental sound and video work. Kite has published in the Journal of Design and Science with the award-winning article Making Kin with Machines, co-authored with Jason Lewis, and has done a whole lot of other writing, 3 pieces we read for this session. Noelani Arista and Archer Pechawis. Kite was a 2023 Creative Capital Award winner. There's a lot of accolades here. 2023 USA Fellow, really impressive, and a 22-23 Creative Time open call artist with one of our favorite wonderful colleagues and professors, Alicia B. Wormsley, who's in the School of Art here at Carnegie Mellon. Kite is currently a distinguished artist in residence and assistant professor of American and Indigenous Studies at Bard College, and a research associate and residency coordinator for the Abundant Intelligences, an Indigenous AI project. Please welcome Kite. Take it away.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Mhm.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And I'll probably talk around 45 minutes and show some video. I have a very I could talk for forever. I'll really try not to. I do have a good sense of time though, so I'll start to like skip through things as I get aware of the time. This Wahamble Sa'a, Dreaming with AI, this presentation I want to show you all today. Wahamble Sa'a is like the noun for dream. So it's like the dreamer of the dream, which is a great word. So I want to start you off with thinking about these four questions, or which are what are your, just to think about and chew on throughout what I'm showing you today. What is your definition of a dream? What is the biggest dream you've ever had, especially when it comes to sleep dreams? Have you ever used your dreams in your practice? And then, who or what was the last non-human being you communicated with, physical or non-physical? And so, these are the kind of the questions that I sit with daily now in my practice. Um, but they're really rooted, of course, like I wouldn't say all artists, but many artists, they're rooted in political underpinnings. Let me go back. Questions like, how can we rest amidst police terrorism and ongoing genocide? How can we dream if we cannot rest? And these, of course, are Alicia Wormsley and my, mutual shared questions that we ask in our work together. And I kind of wanted to start us out with a favorite quote of mine by uh, uh, Jorge Luis Borges from Tla Nuclear Orbis Tertius, which is like, I think one of my favorite texts I read when I was doing my undergrad. Studied with a man, Martin Plot, who's a Borges scholar. The quote is, from the remote depths of the corridor, the mirror spied upon us. We discovered such a discovery is inevitable in the late hours of the night, that mirrors have something monstrous about them. So, when I think about artificial intelligence and media making. I, I feel very grounded in the work of Borges, who writes about the insidious nature of fascism in the world, which is always present. And new technologies like artificial intelligence act as harbingers of these times and political movements, because often we make discoveries of their spying on us far too late. When I worked on this last time I worked on this presentation, it was for Hakave, which is the House of World Cultures in Berlin in Germany, which is kind of on a very fascist precipice at the moment, suppressing free speech. And so I thought this was uh, really important to talk about police repression of free speech at universities and at art institutions, because while always feels like it won't happen to us, it always does. And AI is deeply intertwined with that. So with that, I introduce myself formally. Taki api Kigloni Hawi, or Suzanne Kite Machipikashto. Los Angeles, etahan hal mahikania kelwatie. And now I king leader Kite Chepi na dawe king Dennis Kite Chepi. Unchi Carol Jean Mesteth na Mildred Ferrio at Chakiepi. Gaka Bill Stover, Machpia na Jean na Edwin Spigalza at Chakiepi. Oglala Hamacha, Chante Westena Pechi Usapo. So that's my formal Lakota Yapi greeting. I like to start these with my tribal ID card, where I'm only 3/8 of a person to the US government. A very old ID. So my family's obviously from around here, from Turtle Island. More specifically, we're from my folks are from South Dakota, and very specifically from a little town called Kyle, sometimes Batesland in Pine Ridge Reservation. But we're very closely related to our neighbors in our unceded territories, especially Rosebud, Res, and Cheyenne River. So, even more specifically, in talking about ethics and their meaning to me, we're hyper locally connected to the No Flesh Creek, to the lands around my great grandmother Evelyn Stover's home, where my family still is building houses and expanding our family unit, our Tioshpae. And then uh, these are the people who I draw my research very directly from. Of course, like my family every part of my family affects me and my research and my subjectivity, um, the way I make knowledge. But these are the, people I really spend a lot of time with, especially my cousin Corey Stover. Uh, Recently, I asked my two closest colleagues that I work through artificial intelligence processes with are Jason Edward Lewis, who is my mentor, and was my advisor for my dissertation, my PhD. And then our colleague and friend Scott Benison-Abandan, who's a wonderful photographer and filmmaker, Uzana Shinabe from it's from Sault Ste. Marie, and Jason's Hawaiian and Samoan. And we we often spend our social time talking about consciousness and AI. And Scott's current definition of consciousness is any degree of awareness of the relationship between the external worlds with many degrees and internal worlds with many degrees. And Jason's current definition of AI is that AI is a bundle of computational technologies to address specific technologic needs. But to me, one of the interesting, giving, constant questions is what is a non-human in relation to these definitions of consciousness and AI? So in 2015, I was at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, and I met this wonderful Tuscarora artist and academic, Jolene Ricard, who used this term cosmology-scapes with me for the first time. And cosmology-scape to me encapsulates an intricate web of interactions between and through the land and cosmos. So humans, the earth, and the universe interweaving into a single sphere of human perception. And this was very helpful to summarize the work I had been doing up to this point, which was a lot of it building body interfaces for performance. So having custom-made computational instruments on stage, really coming out of the instrument building world in music technology at CalArts, California Institute of the Arts in LA. In 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, those kind of years. And this is a little video of this open source software for inertial motion units. And I built my first one with my friend and colleague James Hurwitz. So at this time it was, radio wave driven, and it could do the same things I'm trying to do now, which is control sound and video through computational programs like DAWs, and VJing software at the time was what I was really using, a lot of Ableton. And so these systems allowed me to have very simple control over the computer. But, as we dug deeper into this, I wanted to make a very specifically Lakota wearable interface. And of course, when you want to build something new, there are many streams of history that affect what you're building and influence what you're building, whether you acknowledge them or not. For me, I think of these historical streams as computational media, AI ethics, wearable, human-computer interface building, Indigenous contemporary art, of course, and Lakota philosophy. And investigating the intersections between these becomes very clear that embodied performance is the technology that creates knowledge for Lakota people, that is Lakota epistemology. So I see myself as performing the relation between the body and the cosmos, between the land and the cosmos in the, simple, sometimes silly experimental forms of performance. And in 2018, when I started my PhD, I created my first machine learning artwork called Listener. And Listener opened up a lot of questions for me, because good art asks more questions, leads to more questions, and doesn't provide answers. Very few answers, just more questions. And I had a lot of questions after making Listener. One of which was, first of all, is this good at all? Which, that's up for debate. But I definitely have more questions of, is it ethical? And um, I started to think about, while machine learning was becoming very important to my performance practice, it was unclear about what the Lakota stance was on establishing and maintaining relations between non-human beings and myself was. So I turned to this idea of cosmology scape, but the cosmology scape feeling like this tension, this relationship between human and human, human and non-human, non-human and non-human, all occurring in place. And I knew that Lakota knowledge, my family's knowledge, is locatable. It's locatable in our family members, and our elders, and ceremonies, and song, in slow listening practices and processes. And of course, not for all people at all times, not for all of us at all times, even. But the cosmology is at the center of this theoretical framework that I was trying to think through. All were grounded in my grandfather Mahpia Najin's teachings, um, and all had to do with this concept of the good way, which is a English kind of colloquial term for, to me, I interpret it as choices one makes in the path of life, or attitudes towards others and during conflict, or protocols which grow or maintain healthy relationships. And this term protocols is a wonderful word in English, as it is useful in computation, as well as being very useful in talking about global indigenous practices of rules that maintain a core sense of responsibility between individuals and community in these decision-making processes. So, this research is, very wide-ranging, but very grounded in ideas that come out of anthropology, even like about interiority, relationality, animism. And what was core to me was Lakota relationships with stones as beings. And so to me, this is where I started thinking about non-human futures. And I always share this quote from Vine DeLawyer Jr., who says, respect involves two attitudes. One attitude is acceptance of self-discipline by humans and their communities to act responsibly towards other forms of life. And the other attitude is to seek to establish communications and covenants with other forms of life on a mutually agreeable basis. And Vine DeLawyer also expresses this related sentiment about the enslavement of non-humans as if they were machines. And slavery is the backbone of colonial capitalist power and the Western accumulation of wealth. And so it makes sense that it would be the end logic of any ontology which considers fellow entities unworthy of relation, which denies them the reciprocity that we expect ourselves. And to me, it's not, when we think about AI, it's not a question of whether machines deserve to be entities, but rather a question of which ontologies, which states of beinghood and acknowledgments of beinghood we choose to shape our worlds, and what ethics those are made of. So, I talk through this in this Making Kim with Machines article. And then eventually we worked on a white paper, a position paper, where we're thinking through indigenous protocols as a way to set up relationships with the world in ethical ways. Meanwhile, I was working through what it meant to make machine learning artworks, and and kind of making them in order to analyze their ethics. And the reality is, you can't make anything with computational systems at the moment that is ethical because we cannot know our materials intimately enough to know where they come from. So that goes for any computational system, any tool that uses a computational system. We're lost in this labyrinth of distant materials. So this sculpture is what helped me think through that and grasp that, and deal and make artwork that can hold these complexities uh, in it as a sculpture. And so this is, I consider to be made of song, power, sound, processors, machine learning decisions, handmade circuitry, gold, silver, copper, aluminum, silicon, and fiberglass. And it's called Ian. And this the view from below. It's a sculpture with a dome with hair braids, and there are actually LED lights in the hair braids that are playing video, and the video is being generated based on machine learning decisions in a system called Wekinator, which was very popular at the time. And yeah, oh, I want to do that. So in thinking through EA, I wanted to think about what would be an ethical framework if I want, like what happens instead of trying to make an artwork and then being like, oh, it's unethical, all the way down to the bottom. I wanted to work the opposite way and say, all right, what is an ethical thing that I know to be good, a good way, and then build an artwork out from there. And so I turned to the very clear protocols around Lakota knowledge of building sweat lodges and building ceremonial spaces, and how the decisions made in the process of building that I could use as a framework to make something else. And so this became my submission to the Indigenous Protocols paper, where I imagined AI as a pool of water with streams of protocol feeding into it, with tributaries. Or if I zoomed in on one of these, it could be made of steps of protocol that are possible to be made in a good way. So check out that paper if you're interested in that. And so when I think about AI and consciousness now, it sort of shifted into an idea of, became very popular to think about AI as having beinghood, which I think is a little bit misleading, and I dislike when my work is misinterpreted as an excuse to do personification of AI. I think it's a vast misreading. I think I'm saying the opposite, because when I think about artificial intelligence and I ask the question, what non-human being am I listening to when I listen to a machine learning sound sculpture? I think I'm listening to Stone's mind from Bolivia and parts of Africa. I think I am listening to Stone's mind from those places that are melted and reconstituted and then shipped overseas. I think of their ancestries as being completely separate from my ability to reform them into artworks. So when I interact with a machine learning sculpture, am I interacting with AI or am I interacting with the material results of capitalist colonialist process? So I think you looked at the anatomy of AI this week, and go back. Anatomy of AI, very inspiring to me. Um, I, it's an interesting project that I think doesn't go far enough and isn't particularly political in all ways that I wish it was, but it does a good job of making very, very clear when you scroll through all the details and you get down to the very, 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 very bottom of the whole PDF, the least paid workers are unpaid user input. And that still remains completely true, is you're basically paying to add to these large data sets. And only above zero is miners in the Congo. And when we think about material consequences of choices that we make with computational material, we have to uh, be able to hold the knowledge of the material cost of these items. And if we're going to project personification onto them, these human beings and this land needs to be core to that state of beinghood. So, and of course, then the result is the use of AI, the use of war in order to build computational materials, and then the use of AI in wars at the end stage. So I'll wrap that up by moving to, what my research team does and what we're involved with globally. So our project is called the Abundant Intelligence Research Program. And we really started, we kind of rooted in Montreal, and we spent a lot of time in Hawaii and now in New Zealand with our Maori and Kanaka relatives, and taking very seriously centering our values. And so this value of abundance, meaning regeneration and reciprocity and generosity, saying that kind of defining what we want to be at the center of our computational tools. And so, I spent a lot of time teaching research methodologies. Methodologies is the core of what I do. It's the way I make excuses for using AI and making art and then writing about it. That's how I do my fundraising and get projects made by saying that research is the core, and what we're doing is defining Lakota methodologies and indigenous methodologies for creation and use. And so, I'm very lucky to have been brought up through academia with Jason Lewis in a world where we're trying to imagine new research paradigms, like where we're not only developing AI tools, but also imagining the future and doing training and so forth, and integrating them into our communities. A lot of partners involved with this. So what I do at the college is, now we're an AI center. Just very recently, we received centership from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And what I'm thinking about us doing is investigating Lakota semiotics, and I'll talk about that in a second, while communicating what we're doing through public artwork. So a lot of this, to me, is centered in dreaming as a practice. Skip through some of these. But most importantly to Indigenous practices in our methodologies is community connection. So we can't do nothing good can be made without collaborators, without good compensation, without healthy relationships. My community partners are ever expanding, but our current ones that have signed agreements with us are Racing Magpie and Rapid City, which serves Lakota artists, and Forge Project in Ancrum, which is in the Hudson Valley near Bard. And to me, I really have over the years tried to become a more collaborative artist, where I think about where my understandings have gaps and where I want to reach out for help. And to me, I wanted to reach out to a cognitive scientist. I wanted to reach out back to my mentor, reach out to EEG specialists who have done analysis of dreams and the dreaming brain, to traditional knowledge keepers, and to cultural practice professionals. as well as linguists. Um, so yeah, let's see. I wanted to show some artwork and talk about that. I'm going to show a few things, and I think I want to just talk about them a little bit, and then I'm going to show kind of the really dreamy stuff that I'm doing now. I'm going to reshare my video. Um, I make a lot of video. It, it kind of constantly, I made a lot more during, 2020, 2021, but let's see, picture, picture. I don't know the best way to show this. Okay. Da, 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 da. Oh wow, I can be a little floating head. Well, I'll try that. I think I'm now a floating head. Uh, and so this is Pahakin Lenawakan. I'm gonna play it a little bit and then I'll talk about it. Hmm, wait. So I'll talk a little bit about this. This piece is I made this really long time ago. I made this in 2016, 2017. Um, and this piece was really about uh, magic and the trickery that technology is that makes us feel like it's doing magic tricks when it's not. And so this was kind of I make a lot of very massive works and with many, many, many parts, and then I'll extract things and kind of hone them in to presentations really based on what is necessary for a space, an installation, a screening, and I'll kind of hone them through need. And this piece in particular was really about the form of convincing rhetoric that my grandfather uses to um, convince people of truth. I'm really drawn from a paper called um, Truth and Belief in Native American Epistemology by Lee Hester and Jim Chaney, which is very important to me. And this was kind of I'd started to use a lot of interactive media at this point for performance, and I wanted to kind of make a performance that was a whole statement against it that was extremely complicated. It was scripting. It was a 30-minute piece of I memorized so many things, and um, this piece really I used it to ground myself in what I thought knowledge making was and what it wasn't. So um, oh, I want to show Yanye a little bit. So this is the first time uh, this piece was shown. And this artwork was, I mean, to talk about in terms of video, experimental video is as bad as experimental as you can get because the video is being played by like a handful of tiny lights. And the machine learning interface is made in a way that's very circular. So I wanted audience input and audience perception to be in a circular system where I could attempt to simulate what a closed loop was like, where you're on one end and the machine learning's on the other, except, then you get into these problems of questions of agency. Um, I want to show a little bit of this fever dream. And fever dream was, I think, mm, first or second kind of attempt at natural language processing, which was used to be extremely hard to use these systems. You had to train them yourself and build them yourself and run them. Um, and I'm very proud that we did this back when it was hard, because the output is very bizarre. So this is, I don't really do this kind of work anymore. What we did was we made our own data sets. So this basically is a chat bot trained on um, a combination of my papers and different Native philosophers. And then we had this kind of dichotomous relationship in the data set with uh, cult leaders and cult leader speeches, very famous ones. So I'll just play a little bit of it.
When I first saw her, she was standing upright. I thought, this is unreal.
Well, if you look at the Earth, there are certain places that seem to have power, and we don't know what kind of power it is, except you have a different feeling, you feel energized.
While they were digging for the basement, a gruesome discovery was made. Burial remains of the long dead.
In addition to dose, the health effects of radiation also depend on the dose rate.
Religion and science in the West are both wholly materialistic.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ziad Kazi, a medical toxicologist working with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
So this was like a whole rabbit hole I went down for a bunch of years about the relationship between the paranormal and settler desire for indigeneity. I have some papers on it. I stand by the research. It got published, for better or for worse. But yeah, this work also extremely experimental video work with of course there's like no good documentation. It's usually a screen, a TV, or some sort of screen with a LiDAR sensor. We usually used, I think we've switched over to using webcam, but at one point LiDAR was like the way to go. And as you walk towards the screen, the channel changes from one conspiratorial video to the next, and they get more conspiratorial the closer you get. And the text is being kind of generated live from this data set that combines cult leaders with all sorts of bonkers stuff. Yeah, what I don't even know what else to say about this. Definitely a video experiment. So kind of finally more in my wheelhouse of performance. I'll show a little bit of this performance work. I'm not going to show them most of the high. Work a lot with high 8 too, and which is like a video format from the 80s. And this video shot on high 8. No, this was shot on VHS. I can't remember. I think VHS. And this is similarly an early natural language processing experiment, except what I'm doing is I still kind of do this with less fervor now. I try to process my psychological needs on a more healthy basis. But what I used to do is just collect audio dealing with my mental state for like 6 months to a year, and then make one horrific performance piece to deal with it all in one go. And so this was one of those. So a lot of like family recordings and field recordings and sound recordings from. And this was this is when I started working with a choreographer, and the choreographer is Muskie Creek choreographer Olivia Camfield, and they still work with me. Oh, and the hair braid in this piece is controlling the machine learning system. You get the point. It's experimental music, very loud. All right, I'm gonna switch back, and I'm gonna talk a little about the dreams practice, and for the last few minutes. So, okay. Oh, I'm still a bubble. That's kind of cool. I'll leave it like that, where I'm a floating head. So when I do my research, I'm thinking about methodology. So methodology is the process by which someone makes something, or the methodology could be used in a research term as the methodology is kind of the whole philosophy of how one decides what process they're going to do to get to knowledge. And these are all the methodologies I discovered just from interviewing extended family and community and close family. And these are just things that they did while I was interviewing them, not even things that I was doing. So things like singing, collaborating, harmonizing, beating, listening, praying, resting, gifting, offering medicine, offering tobacco, storytelling, speaking to non-humans, feasting one's tools, which was a interesting one. Fostering conversations. So these are the things that we use in order to make new knowledge. And I started to make like graphics to try to define what these are. So these are like where the artwork or the new thing, the creation is in the middle with the cosmos, the stars and stones, the non-humans and the humans, the knowable and unknowable, physical and non-physical worlds on either side. And imagining that protocols and decision making and ethics are the nodes by which the universe around a new thing is created, a new artwork is created. Let's skip through some of these. So one of the people I interviewed was Jackson Two Bears, who's a Ganyangeha Haudenosaunee artist and researcher. And Two Bears talks about his practice. He says that he's been paying attention to his dreams, things that happen, and how those things interconnect with the things I'm thinking about, because they help us get outside of the sensory experience of this version of reality and help us think of things in that sense, not making artwork necessarily just for human consumption. So there are a lot of ways that I approach dream work. I'm just going to show a few examples. This is a film called Three Dreams, and yeah, these are three big dreams. So big dream is kind of a dream science, loose science term for dreams that seem more powerful than other ones. Sleep dreams. I'll just show a little bit of the bear one. Sorry if this is loud. It's loud. Just a clip. It's not very long, but it's three big dreams. And I tried my very best to not mediation is requirement in making things in the world, but I tried my best to not convert it to a script to make the film. So what we did was I had a storyboard artist make storyboards from kind of just loose dream description, and then we made those straight into the film, which I'm sure the line producer loved. Another one I did, which I won't show any of, was I made a kind of a complex film that had a graphic score in it, where I basically enacted what I would consider like daymares or kind of incessant thoughts or like uncontrollable thoughts. And so I turned that into a piece. This one is another one, four hides, which have these shapes on them, which I took from a one big dream that I divided into four parts. And so I'll just play. So it was a very audio dream. So I made the audio first, and then I converted it into hide sculptures. There was like a weird dream about a pool and my dead grandfather was there. And then I was like diving to the bottom to get this flower. And then all these people were singing. It was intense. So I use all this. I'm going to wrap it up by talking about the system that I use to make most of my work now. It's so in Lakota culture, we use this geometric system that is basically a not basically, it is a language, often used by women and two-spirit folks to take their dreams and visualize them. Visions in Lakota Yapi, our language, dream and vision are kind of one word. So what I do is I bring the system, the designs to performers and especially classical music, new music people, and have them create their dreams. And then I turn them into scores, graphic scores, and then we perform them. So that was Santi Lukwit and his folks singing his song. So, Indigenous methodology drives me to want to make sure that community members are uplifted and compensated and centered because I leaned on him so heavily in that process of making that. I made sure that he was featured and his work was featured in the concerts in Chicago. Yeah, so now what I'm doing, spending all my time doing is thinking about Lakota semiotics and this sort of geometric system as a way to talk about dream making and dream language and think about anything that I make, film, sound, performance, as rooted in this interpretation of dreams through these symbols. So doing things like collecting my dreams and translating them into this graphic system, like in this PDF, or making sculptures so they can be embroidered in the gallery and then interpreted, or making, this is very, very large sculptures, like 30-foot walls, where the sculptures are between star and stone sculptures, graphic scores for symphony orchestras. I just did this one in Tucson. Writing, yeah, and it's one that I've been performing a lot. I try to only make one big work like a year and then try to play that as much as possible because it's just so time consuming to make a big work. There was like a video and then the audience's faces trigger the video to shift. And then I'm using this score where I'm traversing the graphic symbol by symbol and doing choreographed moves for each one, which are connected to my 5 sensors that have machine learning connection to Ableton Live with my symphony recordings in them. And oh, did I have that at the end? Oh, I thought I had the more, but yeah, this is where the music lives, the sound. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at. I really am trying to avoid natural language processing and general adversarial networks and making video. I mean, I'm going to do a little bit of them this year just with a postdoctoral fellow who's my student right now, because he's passionate about them. So we're going to explore them together. But to me, one of the big things that makes me pause with machine learning is this question of what does it mean that guessing the next most likely word or pixel with artificial intelligence has been solved so quickly? And again, if things are easily made, to me, that it's giving answers too quickly when I want questions from my artwork. And of course, the ongoing unanswerable question is, how can we dream if we cannot rest, and if our relatives cannot rest either? Yeah, I'm gonna just show me and Alicia's thing and then be done. But if you haven't already, please check out our website, cosmologyscape.com, and where we've worked really hard to make a system where you can contribute your dreams and follow dream paths. When you follow the dream paths, you get these quilt squares that also prescribe you tea recipes. And I'm working on a way that this also produces scores for orchestra or musicians. And then also what's a great resource on here in the About section is, if you go all the way to the bottom, we have a huge resource document on all of the reading we did about dreams, Black and Indigenous dream practices, and other artwork. So a lot of stuff. And then I worked on this data governance document, which is really important because just because I ask people to submit data about themselves, they should know what's happening to the data, storage and access, preservation and deletion, data management, reuse, and that's kind of it. So I think for the next, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's all. I just want to say that if you're in Brooklyn, you should go see the sculptures, which are out for the next few weeks.
Oh, it's nice. Thank you so much. That was so wonderful, Kite. Everyone has a question prepared for you. So we're going to go around, and I think I'm going to start with Noah, since Noah's right there near you. Do you need a little break or anything? Are you okay, Kite?
I'm okay. I'm gonna put in a tea order to my partner.
Good. Noah, go ahead.
Yeah. I was really interested, particularly in the a lot of the works that you wrote about, and building things in the good way, and like kind of in the way in which you use make systems and protocols for specifically performance. But I think aside from art, I'm kind of curious how you would recommend going about building maybe protocols and systems for life, or in the ways you interact with people.
Um, wait 1 second. Can you bring me a cup of tea? Tea? Yeah. Um, I that's a funny question. I don't know how to live life. I'm just making it up. Um, I I think that that's what's good about indigenous methodologies, indigenous protocols, is they tell you, it gives you bumpers for living. There's really clear, they don't translate perfectly to contemporary world for sure. And texts like Leanne Simpson's As We Have Always Done are great for that, because there's a lot of misconceptions about indigenous relationships to everything, because things are so hyper local, like practices are so local. But some really clear ones are they seem so simple, like elders eat first. And if you think about that, and you take that as a framework and apply it, if I take that and apply it to my life, it becomes really clear what to do with my day.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I do, I teach Indigenous methodologies for research at Bard, and we work the whole semester to try to come up with each student thinking about, okay, what are my family, chosen family, community family, whatever communities you decide or claim you and you claim them, what values and protocols that they already have in place that you know are good and ethical and that you want to go apply them as a framework to making new things. So one of my students a couple years ago uh, Ukrainian, and we spent a lot of time thinking about like Ukrainian stitching patterns, stitching practices as really clear protocols, frameworks for doing relation building. And it really works. It transfers so well. These like simple things that our community elders, art elders, intellectual elders gift to us.
So it's something that's both kind of personal and kind of community based in the same sense.
Yeah, like it'll like they kind of prescribe yeah, the simplest things. I right now I'm thinking a lot about recipes and food and how simple like community recipes tell you exactly how to be a good person. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you're muted if you're.
I'm so sorry. I was thinking going vertically, like what I see vertical. KJ?
So earlier when you were talking about like methodologies, um, you mentioned speaking to non-humans, and I was curious if that's different from speaking to humans or how it's different from praying, because that was like a separate category.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the actual what the examples were that I wrote that from. Um, one of them was like clearly like there were dogs in the house and they needed constant attention, which was interesting. Constant interruption to a research practice. Um, but that's so true. When you have animals, they just need you all the time. And the I think in like a more serious way, if speaking to non-humans has become like very integral in this research because we ask ourselves, all right, we want to have a relationship with this nebulous possible artificial intelligence system. Um, how do I do that? The clear way to do it is to look at how you want to interact with or how you already interact with non-human beings in other ways in your life. And so in my family, that's having ceremonial events where you're communicating with spirits, ceremonial events where you're communicating with animals. Um, Animals with like a capital A, so not like just like a random horse on the road, but like, important beings. But also with random horses on the road, like that, you see a random horse, it's got something to tell you, it tells you. But taking very seriously interactions with the world around us. Um, it's like simultaneously like joking about them, like holding the humor of it while taking it incredibly seriously. Um, and I think that's a really clear way my family makes knowledge. So all of these things are things, pathways, steps in the process of making new knowledge. So we want to write a new song. I ask the composer that I'm working with, Santi Witt, how did you come up with this song? And the story starts. I looked out my window and I was listening to this bird sing, and then the song just came to me. Sure, he could have just said, I just made up the song one day, but that's not what he said. He said, I was listening very hard to this bird. And that was the process that new knowledge was moved on to this plane. Yeah.
Thank you.
Super interesting. Hey, Luca, got a question?
Um, yeah, I was curious to hear more. I saw in your work, um, I saw like in your work the like embroidery and stuff I was very interested in, and I was wondering if you could talk more about the relationship between like um kind of textile kinds of work and like their connection to like computation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I'm not a textile historian, which I'm sure you're aware of all the awesome like historical connections between textile and computation, especially. I mean, I'm always in super amazing awe of Navajo weavers and their place in textile and computation history. I think for me, I my experience with working with computational materials is soldering and like laying wire to make a connection from one place to another. And I think the further we get, and that's why the maker movement in the 2000s, 2010s is so important. And I really hope we do not lose our skill sets in making simple computational things or complicated computational things, because having a grip on making new things is what keeps us connected to our materials. Um, and so I guess that's how I see it. And to me, I just really want to make things that I can touch and that other people can touch. Um, I, still hate the fact that fine art involves like a lack of touching objects. So that's what draws me um, to textile. Yeah.
So true. There's so little touching. Um, where are we? Stella? Or no? Oh, sorry, Lily, are you there still? Okay, Stella, shoot. Go ahead.
I had a question when even like in the reading and when you like just said about like interpretations, because personally I try to use my cultural identity as well, and I was just wondering like how far like of misinterpretation should be like acceptable, if that makes sense, because like some professors say like, oh, interpret like there's so many interpretations, but and it's okay for like every people to have their own. But I was thinking like when it comes to like cultural meanings, then I do also agree that misinterpretation would kind of like lead to something else.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, yeah, what a great question. I mean, it's like there's a bunch of ways to answer it. One of them is like, well, how much can you stand personally? Like, how much can you stomach? Um, how much of misinterpretation can you personally put up with before you have to be like, all right. And then at the same flavor, different flavor of same question is, you know, something gets misinterpreted that you present, when do you say, oh, well, that means I need to rework the way I'm presenting it because obviously I presented it in a way that's not working for me. The other question is like, oh, maybe it's just the wrong audience. But I'm really of the thought that artwork and performance is manipulation, and so I want to figure out the way that manipulating my audience works for me. Before I was an actual academic, I would like perform being academic as a performance. A lot of performance work I made as a pretend academic, and then I accidentally just started doing academia. And then I was like, all right, well, if you're going to publish me, I might as well just go with it. And but when it comes to protection of work and family identity, like identity like I don't really use the word for myself because I find identity to be too flimsy of a term. Instead, I consider myself as a political being in relation with other political bodies. So I'm, I don't subscribe to the thing where I'm, I'm a political being. I'm a voting member of a nation within the United States, a separate nation. And one of the teachings that I learned during my dissertation time was this thing about how we have to figure out how we're going to protect important family knowledge, and that's a learning curve in itself. But I like to err on the side of caution. So, um, some of my big dreams I make public. I make artworks with them. I meet, but then I very importantly mediate them in ways that make them safe to share. And so that the mediation of them, the translation, stitching them down, turning them into textiles, making of experimental sound piece, all these different ways in order to put little protections around them. And then some of them are so special, I'm just gonna put them away.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Really great question. Can I just interject a little bit before we move on? I'm curious, protecting family knowledge. I've thought a lot about this, and it feels like, I don't know if you relate to this, that it's also a question of class, not just a genealogy of the family, but like bourgeois families know how to protect most of them because it takes money, it takes storage, it takes valuing one's past. So I wondered if you also encountered that in like indigenous histories and in trying to protect those. Does it vary also within those communities across class?
Oh, that's a really good question. Class is so difficult to pin down in Native communities. It, I find so many Native communities are really private. Like there's a real sense of privacy. So even being an artist is like a wild, very non-Native, a public professional fine artist is like a wildly non-Native action. Um, uh, and but you also, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of Native actors. I don't know what their families think. I think they're just very proud of them. But um, I think I when I think about protection, I actually really connected to reinterpretation more than like safeguarding, um, where the story is purposefully mediated to become an art object, um, in like traditional like quill work and beadwork, where somebody has a vision, it becomes a quill work or beadwork thing, and then nobody knows the interpretation. It then becomes a gift, and then somebody reinterprets it forever. The same way I've heard people process very intense trauma by telling a story about it later that I know is not true, but then it becomes the truth. And that was, yeah, that's hard to explain quickly, but like the storytelling as a mechanism for protecting oneself, which we can all relate to. You tell a story, you twist some details, and then you've protected the thing that needs to be protected. But that is like a common mechanism, I'd say.
Interesting. Cool. Thank you. Jenny, I'm bouncing around now. Sorry.
Yeah. I've also like been interested in AI art for a while, and I've like seen it sort of change over the years, and I was wondering how your perspective on AI art has changed, especially like ethics wise, because like when I was first starting to get interested in it, it was pretty niche and like you couldn't really use it for much, I feel, but now it's become like an actual profitable sector, and big companies like Google and Microsoft, are investing lots of money into it. And I wonder if that, and you use like AI in your art, so I was wondering like how that has changed for you.
Yeah, it's changed so much so quickly. It's wild to like watch a technology be born in a way. Um, and I don't even know what to think about at this point. It's still so falsely named, like it's just a misnomer. Not everything is AI, but you look at you just if you just watch some like TV ads, or you'd think that every single thing in the world is AI now, when it's usually they're literally lying. And it's because there's not some sort of like regulation on calling something AI or not. But just because it's got a little bit of machine learning, I mean, okay, now it's AI. Soon I think the marketing ploy, the marketing desire will be over, and they'll need to come up with something else. And then I think it'll finally split into being actually named correctly. Because something that makes uh, like fake photographs is a really, really different tool than ChatGPT. They're collected under the same like user interface right now, but they have nothing to do with each other. Uh, technology wise. So I, I don't even know what to think about art. It can be really boring. That's what I think about it. When I teach an AI art class in the fall, no, wait, it's fall right now, spring semester, and I mostly teach every tool I can possibly find as quickly as I can find them in order to convince people that if they make really tacky art. You got to work really hard to make interesting art that makes sense to use AI with it. And I wouldn't say that I'm always successful. I've got some really tacky works that, I was just trying something and you just make, I'm an artist. I just make stuff and then see what happens. But um, things are only interesting if they ask more questions. If I make like, I don't know, when I'm bored, I make like cute native witch with like Halloween hats on, and it's not art, but it is cute.
Cool. Yeah. I'm worried about time, so I'm wondering if we can keep going for a few more, but could everyone that didn't speak yet put their question in the chat? And then I might try to summarize some of the questions, put them together in little groups, and then Kite can see them too over there, just so that we don't take forever to get through every person. But while you're doing that, we skipped over Scott, so maybe, and Lily. So let's hear from you, Scott. But everyone put their question in the chat that has not asked one yet.
Wait, so you're saying I should put my questions in the chat, right?
No, you could ask now. I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, you did mention about this earlier, but I want to know about just like visually, how do you decide like the form of presentation for your works? Like I saw the use of computer programs, which is not something I'm used to. And it's just when I'm thinking of something more like when there's like a form of presentation for research, like it's really hard for me to come up with a final visual presentation. Like for example, if I do a sculpture, I have a visual image of what this is gonna be. Like I'll draw it and then I've got to make it. But like, it's just kind of some difficulties in that visual presentation.
So in terms of like deciding what to show or deciding what to make, just generally. Oh, you cut out. Yeah.
Yes, so yeah, and also like how do you organize like visually how it's presented?
I'd say I'm like I'm a spatial person, or I'm like always a very tactile person. I'm not very good with visual stuff necessarily, and I really am thinking like tactily, like what things feel like and what things feel like in relation to each other. So, um, I was I like to work from theory and concept first, where like, okay, I showed those images for a second where it's like an artwork's in the middle and then like the cosmos and the land are on the other side. And those kind of, and then I started to make a lot of works where I'm trying to like figure out, okay, I'm going to put the stone sculpture in the middle and then the star maps on either side. And then I'm going to make star maps and I'm going to continually to figure out in what gallery, how I'm going to position them. But no matter what, I let most, if not all of my decisions be made by the limitations of the presentation space itself. So I'm like, there's a skylight. All right. Now the work's all about the skylight, and using that space. Uh, let's say I know the piece is going to be presented online, a video on form online. I make it really for the person with headphones on online. So I've always, when you're just getting started, you don't have the luxury of somebody giving you lots of really good bumpers and limitations. And so you just kind of have to make them up for yourself. But I like limitations because they tell me, they prescribe what to do with the material.
Yeah, personally, I feel the same about limitations. It's just when there's no limitations, it could go all the directions and you just
Harder.
don't really know where to start here. Right.
Yeah, I
Thank
agree.
you.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just go through the questions in the chat and kind of rapid fire. Yeah, it's interesting that you wanted to read Postmodernism is Not Permission, which is kind of just like my takedown of somebody who's stealing my work. But uh, you know, there is no cure for people taking your work and doing what they will with it. I've had some really bizarre folks reach out and do some really bizarre stuff with my work. Um, I can't control it unless I feel like I can do something about it, which is why I wrote that paper, because I was like, this person needs to be stopped. I will devote a piece of my website to telling them that they're racist. Uh, but I think that always, and I guess in response to this, I like to know. Um, I think somebody put it recently, like the scope of my life or like the scope of my practice, like where my lane is, and I like to stay in my lane because I also like to like not necessarily comment on industry ethics or something because I don't work in AI industry. Same thing, like I don't want to comment on another tribe's needs or desires or opinions. I can't, I can speak for me and my lived experience and my family's lived experience. And beyond that, I like to be careful with my energy and my time. But yeah, thank you for that. I did feel like I could control that situation, and I knew that we could have a real teaching moment with the Tulsa, Oklahoma art community. So thank you for that question. Yeah, and her hair was heavy. I I really do like to work with movement because again, I am somehow a really tactile person, and um, what's important to me about computational material is that it is personal. Like it's you can't make anything without your personal being involved in it. And I want to find ways to like balance that with the absolute tension of AI being so distant from us, that the servers are far away, the companies that manage the data are far away, the AI has been trained on the whole of Reddit and whatever else at this point. But when I think about AI, I'm really thinking that's why I like to use Wekinator, this machine learning system for artists. That's so old now. It's I can't believe I still use it sometimes. But what's great about that is it's not a large data set. It's my data set. I know I made every piece of data that goes into that little that little machine learning system. So I'm intimate with every single part of that data, and I feel good about that. Same thing with kind of training a natural language thing, but also now I'm trying to develop new systems that are trained on my brainwaves, EEG. Yeah, I think when I- intimacy is such an interesting word, and I'm not a scholar of intimacy. Talking about staying in my own lane, I'm really not a scholar of it at all. But I think that when we lose, well, it maybe instead of, I really don't like to be critical either, or do criticism or critical analysis. Uh, of course, I like to do it. I like to do it like with like around a table with like my friends and some drinks and be like critical of everything. But I really like to be generative. I like to make new things. So instead of beating myself up that my most intimate relationship in the world is probably with my phone, instead, I like to ask myself, like, what in this universe do I feel intimacy with that I can then use my art practice to make more of? Because I think art is an excuse to do more of what we want to do. So if I wanted to sit around and be hypercritical of technology all the time, I would, but I don't want to do that. I want to spend time with my family and make things with them and make beautiful designs and teach students and um, walk my dog. Things, those are the things I want to do. So I will find a way to make art work for me. And that's like the manipulation part where I'm like, oh, I'm doing all this in order as an excuse to pay this elder $1,000 to teach me a song, and that's the fun of moving money around for art. Um, and I think that's the most intimate thing I could do is decide that is take my values and make them my practice. Um, when we talk about yeah, when I talked about the storyboard artist and my dreams, I it's true. Dreams are fleeting, and I've done so much reading about the science, and there's ways to grasp them. There's all sorts of techniques. There's people like to explore this. There's people value different ways of capturing the dream. Some people don't remember their dreams at all, and that's fine because you dream all day. You're dreaming, and like 50% of your waking time is spent dreaming. You might be dreaming right now. And in them, I really am very, even though I'm making all this work about dreams, I have become so patient with my brain in retaining or processing or mediating because I'm like, my brain's going to do what it's going to do. Some days it's, you know, our bodies are so constantly changing. Our brains are just constantly changing, um, and affected by so much environmentally. So I'm just what it retains is retained in the morning. If I'm trying to remember physical, like sleeping dreams, same with daydreams. Like if it's coming, it's coming. I'm gonna write it down. If it's not, or if I forget it, or if but my favorite thing is misremembering, because the misremembered dream is the dream itself. When I actually this morning, a couple, no, yesterday and today, I realized that I can force myself to start dreaming while awake again by trying to write down a dream when I wake up because I cannot remember it and my brain just starts making a new one and I can feel it happening. It's so interesting that I can feel it. Anyway, I practice patience with my brain and let it do what it's going to do because it's all correct. What's the dream police going to come and tell me I wrote the dream down wrong? No, like the dream doesn't exist. Um, all right. Performance sounded technology. When I like a two-part question. When I make a narrative, honestly, when I make things, I just try to make things as quickly as possible. I'm an awful editor. I don't edit myself very well. I just go with what comes out and shape something and hope it's good. It's not, and I also believe it's not my business. It's my business if it's really, really bad. Like I'll fix it. I'll try not to make, I'm not trying to make bad things on purpose or painful things to sit through. Though I have, and I do. But it's not my business if it's cohesive or not. I'm there to make the work. Somebody else wants to critique it, that's a whole career path. Uh, I'm there, I'm of the mind that more is more with art making because you can always make there's a different sometimes it's a really important thing you want to do a really really good job because everyone's going to look at it and then go home and talk about it. So I want to make sure that if I'm really going to, especially with time-based stuff, do not make people suffer. That's my number one motto. um but yeah, I think with reconciling technology, I uh I think there is no reconciliation for me with industrialization and technology. It's all, what am I doing to make it better? And that's what the policy branch of our research grants are.
Really fabulous. And do you mind ending on one question I have for you, but just quickly, because I know we got to let you go. It's getting late. Um, Beautiful questions from everyone. Really great. We've been through this whole structuralism just now, film history, expanded cinema, all that stuff. And one question that came up that we were talking about a lot was the question of infinity and how the apparatus of film and filmmaking during the 60s and 70s became this epistemology for questions like about perception, also thinking of one of the things I brought up to my class is that like infinity, back then, like Hollis Frampton and Carl Andre, Paul Schertz, all these people were asking, can you actually measure infinity, right? And the answer is no, but you can order it through conceptual, and they use conceptual mathematics is one way to do it. And I was thinking that, so that apparatus, about projection and film strip brought up all these cool ideas that were both philosophical and conceptual. And I'm wondering, in that one text you gave us, or I guess I chose these right from your website, that the Crawford one on anatomy of an AI system, right? They bring up that idea that Lyotard says that we've moved from affinity to infinity. And that's more like about that relationship between technoscience and capitalism. But I'm wondering, just to make it simpler, can infinity be rethought, or can the apparatus of AI and how I think it is, because you're talking about it, especially indigeneity in AI, it's a different epistemological system than filmmaking, or where do they overlap for you? Because you do both. You're still making films and you're doing all this fabulous AI and computational work. So this is a whole new apparatus, or it's borrowing and doing something else? I mean, it's definitely not like this linear film strip or even this cone of projection, right? A lot of it's unseen, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's so different from the film strip, like in terms of like the technology and the way that it, like, when you do work with algorithms and you tell them to go once and you tell them to go again, they're going to be completely different. The first time, did you see that when you work with like GAN, General Adversarial Network? You generate it once, it's going to be infinitely different than the second time you generate it. And I actually did my undergrad thesis on sonifying mathematic concepts of infinity, and I was so drawn by our inability to perceive, like, I don't know, like almost anything. Like our perception is awful. We assume everything, and I think that's what dreams and like studies of consciousness and dreams really reveal. It's like it's just happening to us. We can barely keep up. Our bodies and our brains are not meant for that sort of processing. But I do think that ancient technologies like linguistics, like ancestral forms of making knowledge, are really clear about relationships to the cosmos and to perceptions of infinity. So actually, right now at the Met, I just went and saw Mary Sully, who is a Dakota, very private Dakota designer and illustrator in the 20s and 30s, and she was making these designs that implied infinity, and they really remind me of like behind me these like Lakota geometries, which always to me imply that they could unfold forever. And but when I'm thinking through what AI could do, I'm also always at the other end with like, okay, what should it do? So we can do math that can crunch the numbers on infinity or the cosmos. So what? And then what are we going to do? What's that thing like? Um, I can't remember what that colloquial thing is. We're like, oh, and then who's going to do the dishes? That, or whatever that phrase is.
Get it?
Yeah, but that's kind of, and that's native humor, like kind of really succinct. Like you ask the deepest, most elaborate question to an elder, and they're going to tell you a dismissive joke, but then 20 years later, you're going to be like, oh no, that wasn't a joke at all. That was the answer, you know? And that's infinity to me, like crazy time cycles and unfolding knowledge that you can't perceive. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. So awesome. Thank you for that. What a wonderful talk. Let's all give another huge hand. Yeah, so beautiful. So we're going to let you go. I just so value what you gave us and your time, your ideas, your work. And yeah, we're going to let you go, and then we're going to take a break, and we're going to look at your the 3 links that you sent me, right?
Yeah, I showed some of them, so yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I'll figure that out.
Okay.
But the film I saw at the Whitney, do I have a link for that?
Yeah.
Good. That's on there, right? I thought so. It's
Yeah.
one of those links. Yeah, because I really want to show them that. It's so beautiful. All right.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much, Kite. And I'll see you in New York.
See you. Bye.
Yeah, bye.